Let's get your view on Invicta and kind of the performance we've seen from the stock, perhaps, because it was a stock that was trading at around 3 Rand. It is now trading at around 78 Rand. It's come back from 80 Rand, but only 2 Rand. If you're an investor in Invicta, you're of course smiling. And, one of the investors is Crystal Visa. So you're partnering with someone who's got a good run when it comes to investments in some strong companies here in South Africa. What did you make of the latest acquisition news?
It's very interesting, I must say. Obviously, as you say, it's one of Crystal Visa's creations. So Invicta sells a whole lot of boring things like bearings and equipment that's used in agriculture. So it's a real industrial company, and this acquisition obviously leads them into a market into the Far East and the Middle East. So I think what the market's doing, because if you look at the share price today, it hasn't really moved. They're probably looking at the company and just trying to understand the acquisition a little bit better. So let's see what happens there. But we have a lot of respect for the management team at Invicta. So it's quite interesting to see where they go with this international expansion now. And
of course, diversification away from a reliance on South Africa. And, that is what we're seeing more and more, if you're specifically talking about gold companies here in South Africa.
Absolutely. I mean, we see it across the board, from industrial companies, retail companies, financial services companies. Every company these days has an international expansion strategy, whether it's to go into Africa or some others have recently, like Imperial, have gone to Europe. Now the likes of Invicta going to the Middle East. So everyone needs to think about their expansion strategy carefully, because that's really where the risk comes in into a business model. But absolutely, it's I guess a sign of the times, and I think it's good for South African industry as well.
Let's talk about the overall equity market, because the All Share Index managing to close in positive territory. One might say that the equity market remained resilient despite the downgrade from S&P. But I suppose you've got to look at which stocks drove the market on the day, and it's pretty much Rand hedge stocks which come to the fore.
Well, we looked at this the other day, Sam, and we try to understand why is the market continuing to rise despite what seems to be a lot of negative things and a lot of problems in the economy. And as you say, that Rand hedge is a massive factor. In fact, some calculations, I think by Nedbank Capital, pointed out that about 75% of their earnings now from the JSE come from offshore and foreign subsidiaries or foreign arms of companies listed here. So that's a really big number, and that goes some way in explaining why the market continues to go up in this current environment, when the Rand has blown in the last week from about 8.30 to I think it's sitting at about 8.75 at the moment. So, and that looks set to run. We've been polling fund managers recently, and a lot of them talking about fair value for the Rand being between 9 Rand and 9 Rand 50. So based on that, at 8.75, there's still a bit of way to go before you get to the likes of 9.50, which some fund managers think is fair value.
And of course, we're seeing this weakening trend, which is very much been the tone of the day. When it comes to commodity markets, that export data from China was really positive. Import data, in fact, also positive. I mean, China copper imports climbing to a 4-month high in September. Iron ore imports, the biggest in volume terms since January 2011. Overall, the signals are good when it comes to China, and that, of course, would have a positive knock-on effect for exporters here in South Africa.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, obviously being a big resource exporter ourselves, and it's been interesting because just before we saw that Chinese number, we'd been watching something called the Baltic Dry Index, which is an index that measures the capacity and use of sea-going vessels that transport all sorts of things from commodities to finished goods. And that had been ticking up in the week leading up to the Chinese export number. But again, we kind of look at some of these numbers and we wonder who's writing the script, because the US job numbers were the best jobs numbers for 4 years, a month before presidential election. The Chinese
Are you buying into the Warren Buffett conspiracy theory?
Every day I'm becoming more of a conspiracy theorist. And obviously,
who was that? Wasn't Warren Buffett? It was one of the other big CEOs,
Jack Welch.
Yeah.
And obviously, the Chinese export number was twice what the market thought. So obviously, you kind of greet it with a bit of skepticism, but it's a positive number, and we'll take that. And when viewed in conjunction with things like the Baltic Dry Index, it does indicate that exports have begun to fire again.
And when it comes to the coal price, when you look at that South African coal price, $80 per ton, low since December 2009, it's very much geared to the Indian growth story and their concerns around that. I mean, which type of exporters here in South Africa, stock specific, would you be most concerned about?
Well, the first one that springs to mind, and one that we study closely, has been Coal of Africa. They have the two operating mines at the moment, the thermal export mines, and at this point, at $80 a ton, I don't think they're making money. So they've also had a bit of problems with the strikes. $80, I think they're about breaking even. Many of these coal companies have contracts in place, which means they have to supply the coal at losses until those contracts roll over, and that's been the case with coal. So hopefully we can get the coal price to tick up on the basis of that Indian electrification story. And as you say, much of that coal will be finding its way to the west coast of India going forward. So it does make some mines marginal, and yes, it's going to put some companies under pressure if it stays there.